Before any visible change takes place in your life, before the marriage, the move, the new chapter, or any outward transformation, something much more significant begins happening beneath the surface. Long before circumstances shift around you, a quiet movement starts within. If you pay attention, you may already sense it. There is a subtle feeling of restlessness, an awareness that the person you have been can no longer fully support the life you are moving toward. This is not uncertainty. It is not instability. It is preparation. What many people describe as signs from unseen forces can also be understood psychologically as the activity of the unconscious mind. As Carl Jung often suggested, the psyche is not a passive observer. It continuously works to guide us toward greater wholeness and integration. When an important life transition approaches, whether it is a lifelong partnership, a major relocation, or a profound personal transformation, the psyche begins preparing long before the event itself arrives. It starts loosening the structures that no longer belong in your future. You may notice this unfolding in subtle but persistent ways. Relationships that once felt natural may suddenly seem distant. Conversations that used to excite you might leave you feeling disconnected. Habits and routines you once relied upon may lose their appeal. This stage can feel confusing because familiar parts of your life begin fading before the next chapter fully reveals itself. Yet this is exactly how transformation works. It does not wait for perfect comfort. It asks for your participation. The shift taking place within you is not about becoming someone entirely different. It is about becoming more authentically yourself. Over the years, every person develops an identity shaped by expectations, family influences, social roles, and past experiences. These identities help us navigate life, but they rarely represent the full truth of who we are. When a significant connection is approaching, especially one carrying emotional and spiritual depth, those incomplete versions of the self begin to weaken. They are no longer capable of supporting the level of authenticity that deeper relationships require. What you are experiencing is an internal reorganization. The psyche is rearranging itself, bringing what is genuine to the surface while gradually removing what has been built on pretense, fear, or outdated expectations. This is why the process often feels like loss before it feels like growth. Yet you are not losing yourself. You are releasing the identities that were only temporary chapters of your development. And this process is remarkably precise. The qualities emerging within you, greater self-awareness, emotional maturity, honesty, and a deeper desire for truth, are exactly the qualities required for a meaningful partnership. Real connection cannot thrive on masks or carefully constructed roles. It cannot survive on illusion. Genuine union requires presence. It requires vulnerability. It asks that you meet another person not through who you think you should be, but through who you truly are. Seen from this perspective, marriage or partnership is not the beginning of transformation. It is the outcome of it. The external relationship simply mirrors an inner integration that has already been taking place. The more aligned you become within yourself, the more naturally you gravitate towards someone who resonates with that same level of authenticity. This is why timing matters so much. It is not determined solely by desire. It is shaped by readiness. The question is not whether you want something, but whether you have become capable of sustaining it. So if you currently find yourself in a season of uncertainty, where answers seem distant and clarity feels incomplete, consider another possibility. Perhaps something far wiser is unfolding beneath the surface. You are not being denied what you desire. You are being prepared for it. You are not being held back. You are being aligned with it. The discomfort you feel is not proof that something is wrong. It may be evidence that something meaningful is taking form. Perhaps the most important element of this process is trust, not blind faith, but a grounded confidence in your own growth. It is the understanding that every moment of confusion, every emotional shift, and every quiet realization contributes to a larger pattern. You may not fully recognize that pattern yet, but it is unfolding with purpose nonetheless. And when the external moment finally arrives, when the person enters your life, when the opportunity presents itself, when the path forward becomes visible, it will not feel forced or chaotic. It will feel natural. It will feel as though everything has been quietly moving toward that moment all along. Not because fate imposed it upon you, but because you have become the person capable of receiving it. Instead of asking, "When will this happen?" consider asking a different question. Who am I becoming as I move through this process? The answer to that question shapes everything that follows. If you can remain present through the discomfort of change, if you can allow outdated versions of yourself to fall away without clinging to them, then you are doing far more than preparing for a new chapter. You are becoming someone capable of fully living it, and that is where every true beginning starts. When you examine your experience closely, you may discover that communication does not always arrive through spoken words. In fact, some of the most important messages we receive in life are communicated long before they are ever expressed directly. Before conversations occur, before declarations are made, a quieter form of dialogue is already unfolding beneath conscious awareness. It is subtle enough to overlook, yet consistent enough to leave an impression. This is what is meant when we say that a partner's message often reaches you before it is consciously heard. From a psychological standpoint, this is not simply a mystical idea. It reflects the natural functioning of the psyche. Jung observed that the unconscious communicates through symbols, recurring patterns, and what he called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to carry personal significance beyond ordinary cause and effect. These experiences are rarely random. They often represent the conscious mind gradually becoming aware of deeper psychological movements already taking place beneath the surface. You may notice this as an unexplained sense of anticipation, a feeling that something significant is approaching even though you cannot logically explain why. Certain themes may begin repeating throughout your life. Discussions about commitment may appear unexpectedly. Thoughts about partnership may arise more frequently. Dreams may carry unusual emotional intensity, lingering long after you wake. These experiences are not necessarily accidents. They may be signals emerging from deeper layers of awareness. Yet it is important to understand that these messages do not arrive as direct instructions. They rarely appear as clear answers or unmistakable declarations. Instead, they emerge through patterns that gradually influence perception and understanding. The unconscious communicates through impressions, symbols, and experiences rather than explicit statements. If you wait for complete certainty before acknowledging these signals, you may miss what is already unfolding. At this stage, resistance often appears. The rational mind naturally seeks evidence, clarity, and proof. It wants facts that can be measured and verified. While skepticism serves an important purpose, it can become limiting when it automatically dismisses experiences that have not yet taken concrete form. The unconscious follows a different language than conscious logic. Understanding it requires a different kind of attention, one based less on analysis and more on receptivity. This is where intuition becomes important. Not intuition as impulsiveness or wishful thinking, but as a refined sensitivity to patterns within both the inner and outer world. It is the capacity to recognize meaning before it has fully taken shape. It is the ability to perceive coherence where others see only coincidence. Within the context of a profound connection, this intuitive awareness often becomes the first bridge between two people. What many describe as a magnetic pull toward someone is often more than simple attraction. It reflects a deeper resonance between psychological structures, shared values, life experiences, and unconscious aspects of the self-seeking understanding and integration. In the simplest terms, we are often drawn toward people who reflect something important within us, something familiar, unfinished, or waiting to be recognized. And through that recognition, both individuals are invited into a deeper understanding of who they truly are. This reflection often begins long before two people ever exchange words. That is why the message can feel strangely familiar even when the experience itself is entirely new. There is a quiet sense of recognition, as though something you have been unconsciously preparing for is finally starting to emerge into view. Not because you have lived through this exact moment before, but because it resonates with an inner process that has been unfolding within you for a long time. The external event does not create that feeling, it simply awakens something that was already there. At the same time, this stage requires wisdom and discernment. Not every coincidence carries profound significance, and not every emotional reaction points toward a deeper truth. The goal is not to assign meaning to every passing experience, but to pay attention to recurring patterns. Authentic signals tend to return repeatedly. They appear through different circumstances, reinforce themselves over time, and gradually create a sense of understanding rather than confusion. They do not pressure you into immediate decisions. Instead, they encourage patient observation and deeper awareness. Perhaps the most important part of this process is learning how to listen, not merely listening to words, but paying attention to your inner world. Noticing shifts in perception, subtle emotional changes, recurring themes, and the quiet movements taking place within your life. The message is not separate from you. It is something being recognized through your own awareness. When direct communication eventually arrives, when conversations happen, intentions are expressed, and circumstances become clear, it rarely feels completely unexpected. Instead, it feels like the continuation of a story that has already begun unfolding beneath the surface. What happens externally simply confirms what your inner experience has been slowly preparing you to understand. Rather than constantly seeking certainty or waiting for outside validation, consider another possibility. The dialogue may have already started. What you are sensing may not be fantasy or wishful thinking, but a growing awareness of something real. The clarity you receive often depends on the quality of your attention. The most meaningful messages in life rarely arrive with dramatic announcements. They emerge quietly. They reveal themselves through patterns, feelings, insights, and experiences that gradually come into focus for those willing to notice them. The question is not whether the message exists. The question is whether you are prepared to recognize it. At a certain stage of life, the idea of relocation begins to carry a meaning that extends far beyond practical considerations. On the surface, moving appears to be a change of address, a shift in environment, or a new set of circumstances. Yet, on a deeper psychological level, it often symbolizes something much greater. It represents movement from one version of yourself to another. It marks the transition between who you have been and who you are becoming. This is why such changes often feel emotionally significant, even when they appear straightforward from the outside. You are not simply changing locations. You are moving through layers of identity. Viewed through the lens of personal growth, this reflects what Carl Jung described as individuation, the lifelong process of becoming more aligned with your authentic self beyond social expectations, inherited beliefs, and external definitions. Many people remain connected to environments that continually reinforce outdated versions of themselves. Familiar places, routines, relationships, and social structures create a sense of stability, but they can also limit growth. When everything around you reflects the person you used to be, it becomes difficult to fully step into who you are becoming. As deep transformation begins, particularly when it is connected to meaningful relationships or life-changing commitments, the environment that once felt comfortable may begin to feel restrictive. What once provided security may now feel limiting. What once felt familiar may now feel too small. This does not necessarily mean your surroundings have changed. It means you have. Once that inner evolution takes place, remaining within the same circumstances can create an ongoing sense of tension. The life that once supported your growth may no longer be capable of containing it. In this sense, relocation becomes more than a practical decision. It becomes an act of alignment. It creates the conditions necessary for a new stage of life to emerge. A different environment does not carry the same history, expectations, or emotional associations. It offers distance from old patterns and creates room for new possibilities. In many ways, it functions as a blank canvas, allowing aspects of yourself that have been waiting beneath the surface to express themselves more freely. This is why moving often evokes both excitement and discomfort at the same time. There is anticipation because of what might become possible. There is anxiety because familiar points of reference begin to disappear. The routines, relationships, and structures that once helped define your identity are no longer present in the same way. Without them, a deeper question naturally arises. Who are you when external definitions fall away? While this question may seem unsettling, its purpose is not to create fear. Its purpose is freedom. For perhaps the first time, you are no longer responding primarily to inherited expectations or established roles. Instead, you are responding to something emerging from within. The relocation itself does not create this inner development. It simply provides the space necessary for it to unfold more completely. There is also a profound relationship between place and psychology. Environments shape perception. They influence behavior, emotional states, habits, and possibilities. Certain places naturally support specific aspects of your personality, while others suppress them. As you become more aligned with your authentic direction, you often find yourself drawn toward environments that encourage growth rather than reinforce limitation. This is not random. It reflects a growing harmony between your inner world and your external circumstances. When a meaningful partnership is involved, this alignment becomes even more significant. The place toward which you are moving is not simply about convenience or opportunity. It often reflects a shared trajectory, a setting where two evolving lives can intersect more fully and begin building something together. The environment becomes part of the story. It serves as the backdrop against which a new chapter unfolds, shaped not only by practical circumstances, but also by the emotional and psychological readiness of those involved. Naturally, people tend to focus on the logistical side of relocation. They think about finances, uncertainty, responsibilities, risks, and planning. These concerns matter and deserve attention. Yet if you view the experience only through a practical lens, you miss its deeper meaning. You overlook the possibility that this movement is connected to a much larger transformation, one that cannot be fully understood through calculations, predictions, or careful planning alone. What is required is not simply preparation, it is trust. Not blind trust in specific outcomes, but confidence in the process of growth itself. It is the recognition that you are not being uprooted without purpose. You are being repositioned. The unfamiliar is not automatically a threat. It is an invitation. An invitation to engage consciously with the next stage of your development. Ultimately, the destination ahead of you is more than a point on a map. It is a reflection of the person you are becoming, And the more willing you are to step into uncertainty with awareness, openness, and intention, the more clearly that emerging identity will reveal itself. So when the opportunity to move appears, whether it arrives gradually or unexpectedly, look beyond the practical details alone. Ask yourself what deeper transformation it may be representing. Because sometimes the journey is not simply about changing where you live, it is about becoming who you were meant to be. One of the most challenging parts of transformation is accepting that something must end. Not partially, not temporarily, but completely. Yet without endings, genuine beginnings cannot take place. This is not simply a philosophical idea, it is a psychological reality. Whenever deep growth occurs, especially during major life transitions or meaningful relationships, something that no longer supports your development must be released. As Carl Jung suggested, the psyche moves toward wholeness, but it cannot do so by building new experiences on foundations that no longer fit. As a result, certain relationships, habits, and beliefs naturally reach their conclusion. Things that once felt essential may begin to lose their relevance. This does not mean your life is falling apart. It means it is being reorganized. Endings are uncomfortable because they create uncertainty. The old disappears before the new fully arrives, leaving you in a space between what was and what will be. Many people interpret this as loss, and in some ways it is. But it is also an opening, a space being created for something more aligned with who you are becoming. The temptation is to fill that space immediately. We often rush toward familiar replacements simply to avoid discomfort, yet doing so can recreate the very patterns we are meant to leave behind. Real growth requires patience. It asks you to let an ending be complete, to understand what it taught you, why it mattered, and why it can no longer continue in the same form. Every ending reveals something important about your values, attachments, and direction. When viewed consciously, it becomes a source of clarity rather than confusion. There is also a difference between forced endings and natural conclusions. Forced endings often come from avoidance or reaction and leave behind unresolved tension. Natural endings, though painful, carry a sense of inevitability. At some level, you recognize that continuing would require betraying something essential within yourself. These natural conclusions create the foundation for meaningful beginnings. You move forward not because something was taken away, but because you have changed. This becomes especially important when entering a new relationship or major life chapter. Old emotional patterns cannot support a future built on authenticity. The ending is not separate from the beginning. It is part of it. So when something comes to a close, consider that it may be preparation rather than punishment. Transformation is not about accumulating more. It is about removing what is unnecessary so that what truly matters can emerge. What you release shapes what you are able to receive. When people think about marriage, they often imagine it as the point where uncertainty ends and stability begins. Psychologically, however, a meaningful partnership is not an end point. It is a mirror. A deep relationship reflects not only your strengths but also your fears, insecurities, and unresolved patterns. This is why meaningful connections can feel both comforting and challenging at the same time. Alongside understanding and intimacy comes exposure. Old wounds, forgotten fears, and hidden reactions often rise to the surface. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something deeper is being revealed. Jung believed that we meet others through the lens of our own psyche. We project, interpret, and respond through patterns formed long before the relationship began. In shallow connections, these patterns often remain hidden. In deeper relationships, they become impossible to ignore. The people who affect us most often reflect important parts of our inner world. Sometimes they mirror qualities we admire. Other times they trigger discomfort because they touch unresolved aspects of ourselves. Because of this, conflict and emotional intensity are not always signs of incompatibility. Often they are opportunities for awareness. The relationship reveals what has been operating beneath consciousness all along. The challenge is not to eliminate these reflections, but to engage with them honestly. It requires responsibility, self-examination, and the willingness to remain open even when self-discovery becomes uncomfortable. This process works both ways. Just as your partner reflects aspects of you, you reflect aspects of them. The relationship becomes a shared space where both people are invited to grow. A crucial distinction exists between projection and perception. Projection happens when we unconsciously place our own inner material onto another person. Perception involves seeing them clearly while remaining aware of our own influence on the experience. Learning this difference is one of the central tasks of any meaningful partnership. It requires honesty, patience, and humility. Yet it is precisely this challenge that gives relationships their transformative power. Marriage is not about finding someone who completes you. It is about meeting someone who encourages greater completeness within yourself. The relationship does not remove your complexity. It illuminates it. And through that illumination comes the opportunity for deeper understanding and integration. Over time, the relationship becomes less about validation and more about awareness, less about expectation and more about understanding. So as you think about the partnership ahead, ask yourself not only what you hope to receive, but also what you are willing to see. Because the person standing before you is more than a partner. They are a reflection of your inner world. And if you can meet that reflection with honesty and awareness, the relationship becomes more than a source of comfort. It becomes a path toward transformation. In the end, the depth of a relationship is not determined by how well you avoid yourself. It is determined by how courageously you are willing to face yourself. And sometimes, the person beside you becomes the clearest mirror you will ever encounter.